God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will start the meeting with announcements, and I'll start to my right with Mr. Liverman. Any announcements this evening?
No announcements.
Mr. Miller? Ms. Carmiller? Mr. Quinn?
None this evening, Mayor.
Okay, oh my gosh,
Oh, wait,
I'm not ready with my announcements.
Actually, I forgot. I do have announcements from Joe Butler that she emailed me about the rec department. The CP pool registration is still happening. You can register online at the municipal website or in person at the rec office. The rec department and Blue Curtain are partnering to offer 2 free concerts at the CP pool on July 15th and 22nd at 7 p.m. And the rec department is hosting the Swimming and Diving Association Championship at the CP pool this year, which is a really big deal. On July 19th and 20th are the dive championships, and July 24th and 25th are the swim championships. They expect 2,000 visitors to CP.
Wow.
And then Community Night Out, which is always a fun event, is on August 1st.
Great, thank you. And I have an announcement that on this Thursday night, June 29th at 7:30 p.m. here in this room, the Planning Board is going to be having a special meeting with a report from the Neighborhood Character Initiative. I'm always forgetting that. Zoning, Neighborhood Character and Zoning Initiative. And there'll be a report from the consultant who's been helping that group with some of the possible next steps. And the goal is to get some community feedback on what the priorities should be moving forward. So you're all welcome back for that meeting on Thursday, 7:30. And are there any staff announcements?
No, nothing.
Nope. Nope. Okay. Then we'll move on to comments from the public for items not on the agenda. And we'll start with, it looks like everybody who signed up on the sheet wanted to speak for items that are already on the agenda. So I'd like to open it up for anybody who'd like to speak on something that's not already on the agenda. Okay, seeing no one, we'll close public comment and we'll move on to reports. And the first report for this evening is the police report. I'd like to invite up the chief.
Thank you, Mayor. With regard, well, actually, first, I guess I do have an announcement. I just wanted to express my thanks to the police department and the governing body and all our staff for the support of our department through our reaccreditation process. We were reaccredited 2 weeks ago at the final hearing, and it really went flawlessly, and there were nothing cited as future issues and no current issues, so we're in very good shape. And again, just thank you to everyone for supporting us through that process. The next thing I just wanted to point out in the police report was our increase in traffic enforcement, specifically as it relates to speeding. Our traffic unit continues to deal, not just the traffic unit, but the complaints come through there and are vetted through there with a lot of speeding complaints. So we have refined our system internally, and as we receive those complaints, they are funneled throughout the department to different squads to correlate with the times of the complaints. And I hope that you and the public are seeing increased presence and enforcement in those areas. So we're doing our best to, and we work with engineering constantly. Their efforts are tremendous at trying to look at structural changes and different issues that can be more permanent in solving the speeding issues that we have. Other than that, I can answer any questions that you might have about the report.
Okay, first, thank you about, partly because of my membership on the Complete Streets Committee, I really thank you about the speeding. I hear the complaints from the residents all the time. And I didn't know if you know that that we have this traffic calming committee, and we're meeting, we kind of we didn't meet for a long time, and we are planning on reaching out to your department over the summer to talk about speed bumps and things like that. But I also had a question about marijuana arrests. I guess you know that at least one of the gubernatorial candidates has come out in favor of legalizing marijuana, and a lot of polling shows that the majority of people feel like it should be legal. And so I'm wondering, what's our attitude toward small amounts of marijuana? Are we still arresting people for that small amounts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess the short answer is yes. Small amounts by statute is under 50 grams. So under 50 grams is a disorderly persons offense.
How much is that? Because I don't know.
50,
Is that like a little baggie, or is it like
no,
a...
50 grams would be like just under a half of a regular sandwich size bag.
Okay.
That's about 50 grams. Over 50 is a indictable offense. But the issue, well, I hesitate to comment on the legalization of it. I am cognizant of what's going on statewide with that, and how does that affect us here in Princeton? We do see a fair amount of marijuana use. And I just happened to be reading about this very recently and just kind of going over it locally. Out of the first half of the year, we had near, I believe, 30-some arrests for marijuana, which include indictables and non-indictables, over 50 grams and under 50 grams. The issue normally comes in with car stops, which I tend to look at more seriously. It's a driving under the influence issue, but that's where we tend to come in contact with most of our marijuana arrests. Only 4 of all those arrests generated by a call. Somebody called us for either they saw somebody engaging in it or there was another reason they called us and we found it. What I can tell you is that those arrests, they take resources. They take time for the officer to come off the road, process, charge, write a report, go to court. So I do understand that argument. And there are a lot of arguments on the other side concerning substance abuse. Locally, I see it affecting us through resources, that if it was either, I guess, decriminalized, it may be more of a traffic summons type of response as it is in other states where it's decriminalized.
Is that similar to a DWI? It would be DWS or something, driving while smoking?
No, so DWI is kind of a different scenario. While a DWI is in New Jersey a motor vehicle offense, it's arrestable. It's mandatory arrest. So that would stay the same, but let's say we encountered somebody for whatever reason other than driving, that wasn't under the influence driving, but was in possession of under 50 grams. The way other states deal with it is they would receive a summons, much like a local ordinance summons for like littering, and that would be a municipal appearance, but it wouldn't lead to a criminal record, and it wouldn't involve a custodial arrest, which wouldn't involve officers being off the road. And I think, law enforcement tends to see those minor offenses and that decriminalization and not tying up resources as maybe a good thing for communities in terms of money and things like that. But I do get a lot of comments on the complete other side that it's detrimental to our youth and things like that. So, but I do personally believe what you would see here is that resources being more freed up, I guess, if you will, less time spent on that custodial arrest side.
And so for the arrests that you've done, are they mostly adults over 21, or do they...
The majority are over 18, which is
over 18,
we do see a fair amount of marijuana possession under 18 as well. Under 18, with the non-indictable, with the small amounts, is it doesn't affect their record in any way. It's considered, in the eyes of the juvenile justice system, as minor. For an adult right now in New Jersey, it is a fingerprintable offense. So the person is processed fingerprinted, and that arrest record goes state and federal.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so my last question is, thank you for my last comment is about the data from the speed signs. It's great that you're sharing it with Code for Princeton, and I think we're going to see some really great reports about that.
And I hope that's right. I hope that's useful to some mitigating or traffic calming types of efforts. I think it will be.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Thank you, Chief. I want to pick up on something Jenny said about complete streets, and I noticed that there was an increase in the failure to yield to pedestrians summonses, and as someone who walks a lot in town, this is a huge problem, especially not so much for motorists in neighborhoods who recognize one another and realize that dogs want to go where dogs want to go, but to some of the employees of our institutions and businesses. So I thank you for that. And I also thank you for your patience as the junior member of council. I always throw you a couple of questions in here. And this month's regard suspicious incidents and suspicious person. So what defines a suspicious person? Is that in the eye of the caller, or and what's the difference between a suspicious person and a suspicious incident, and how are they followed up?
That's a great question. So really, it's a record keeping issue, but they're general categories that fit into our CAD system. And so let's take suspicious person. Suspicious incident can be a little bit different, so I'll explain that next. But a suspicious person usually is called into us. And the most common call is usually around a residential area where a neighbor maybe sees somebody that doesn't live at a house looking in a window, or a car parked. A lot of these calls are at night, a car in a park. Somebody's walking their dog and they see a car after hours in a park where you're not supposed to be by ordinance at, after dark or late at night. And what'll happen is our officers will respond. They'll explain to the person what the call was and why they're there, and they'll ask the person, why they're there, what's happening, and usually that ends it. Lots of times it's people selling things, canvassers during the day. We get that a lot, either with or without a permit. And a lot of the other ones, like I said, are in parks and things. The important thing about these that we rely on the public for, so it's a very it's a catch-22, because we often find ourselves in situations where we do respond to things that are perfectly legal and normal, but we have the duty to investigate. And but we also don't want to dissuade people from reporting things that they deem as suspicious. And we do end up getting burglary suspects that way. Somebody's breaking in a home. We get our rashes of burglaries during the year, and we want people to be vigilant. We get things like a suspicious incident could be like an unattended bag called in at Communiversity Day. Another thing, a suspicious incident can be something that's suspicious people, a suspicious person. A suspicious incident can be anything that we have to categorize that doesn't have another category. We get a call for a weird email that somebody received. That really isn't a crime, but it's suspicious in nature. We document it, we report it, and that's usually the end of it. If it's criminal, it gets categorized as something else and gets follow-up investigation. Often these things are just reported. So let's say we go back and we have a report of a vehicle, and that's being called in as suspicious for some reason, and we get 4 or 5 of these calls, and all of a sudden we find out that we're also having burglaries. That would be a lead possibly to a burglary. So we're constantly monitoring these things and cross-referencing them, but 99% of them, if not 100%, are caller-generated. Sure.
Yeah. Chief, thank you so much. As usual, the police are doing a fairly good job in Princeton. I really appreciate the way that sometimes if you stop the officers, they will talk to you and so forth. One thing I was wondering, do we have I know years ago they used to have like a neighborhood watch type of community. Is that something that is still active in Princeton?
It really isn't. I think there's a lot of informal community groups, which are great, that get together. The majority of those that I encounter are more traffic-related type groups. They're dealing with traffic problems, other maybe zoning issues, and they're groups that get together and meet. But the Neighborhood Watch really was a late 80s to mid 90s initiative that kind of started losing steam around the late 90s, early 2000s, at least here. And there's really nothing formal that we have that that we do in the community. And I guess there's been experiences as they've been relayed to me that they were both positive. There were positive things about them and some negative things about them as well. It's always, something that we're open. The thing that I like to say about our department is we love ideas and we're open to examining anything at all and collaborating and engaging in discussions on anything. So, but in my career, I've heard two sides of the community watch type of organization, why they were good, and some bad stories about them as well.
And the other thing I want to mention, Councilman Miller and myself and the Police Commissioner Howard, we want to thank you also. We've been in the process of looking at new police officers for the future, because as you know, we have a large retirement staff coming up, and we have some of the finest candidates that we feel that we probably can ever muster up. And we just want to say thank you for at least going forward in something that we probably can present to council in the near future.
I appreciate that, Mr. Liverman, and I think that for the future of our community in the police department, recruitment it's the most important thing. That's setting up your department for decades to come, 25 years, 30 years. So we don't take it lightly. We really have put a huge amount of effort into recruiting qualified, diverse candidates. It's a major undertaking for us, huge amount of time, huge amount of personnel hours. But in the end, when we hear that you're satisfied with the candidates, it makes it all worthwhile. So thank you.
Chief, I noticed in your report that there were 18 occasions when you had to use a uniformed patrol officer to do crossing guard duty, and that makes for a very expensive crossing guard. Are we short of crossing guards? I know the school year is over now. It's not an issue now, but going into the fall, have we been kind of systemically short of crossing guards, and is there some way we can correct that situation?
Yes, 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 yes. Our crossing guards are wonderful. We have people that have literally been giving to this community for 40 years as crossing guards. I can't say enough about how wonderful they are. We are experiencing shortages for a variety of reasons, and we have been using officers, parking officers as well. We use them as crossing guards. So, yeah, we're struggling right now. We've undertaken a robust advertising campaign and trying to recruit. It seems that it's at times difficult to retain. We have a core group that stay with us for a long time, and then with the number of crossings we have, if you lose 6 or 7 people throughout the year, that's a patrol squad at times, and it's difficult. So it's a definite priority. We're working very hard on it, and I'm hoping that through the summer we can get the word out. Please put the word out that we are always looking for crossing guards, and we're looking for fill-ins as well that can fill in. So there's some redundancy there, but we are struggling right now. Towards the end of the year especially, we struggled.
What do we normally pay our crossing guards? Do you know that offhand?
don't want to misquote it, we just increased the salary right after consolidation, but I will check into that and get you the exact number. I'll give it to you at Public Safety Committee.
Great,
Because I was going to
thank you.
say, obviously, it might be cost-effective to raise the compensation if we're having a hard time.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think-
we'd rather do that than
Well,
pay police
yeah.
officers.
Well, I think the old rate was like $25 for the entire day or something. That's the morning and the afternoon. And I don't know, yeah, in that range, somewhere near there. The problem with Crossing Guard is that because it takes the morning and the afternoon, it's like your whole day, those 8 hours, you're really working around being there. So I always thought that if we could have some members in the morning do the morning, if it works out for them for the morning, and some members that could do the afternoon, just do the afternoon, and maybe bump that income up, what we pay them, that may help out a little more in the recruitment, instead of someone doing it both times.
That's a great idea, and we do try to do that. You know, it's also helpful, we've looked at using different municipal employees that can maybe get in there at times, and their supervisors can, you know, even as fill-ins, when there's an emergency, they're here every day. So if we have a opening, they can jump in. So we're looking at all types of alternatives. I think the salary for retention could be an issue we can look at. And I think it's weather, life, the demands of life, and scheduling, as Mr. Liverman said, all come into play. It's very difficult for us to really get somebody there every day at all the crossings.
Okay, anybody else? Well, I just want to thank you again and also congratulate the police department for accreditation. I know you said that in the beginning, but it is just a major undertaking, and it's a sign that our police department is really a model police department, follows all best practices, and you guys always make it look easy. I remember there were periods in the past where both former borough and former township went for long periods without being accredited because it is a major undertaking. So we're happy that the consolidated Princeton is and will continue to be. So thank you for the work.
Mayor.
Okay. I forgot the proclamation, but I'm going to recommend that we go through the rest of reports and then amend the agenda based on the folks who are here, so we can get to the items that people are here for. But let's continue through the reports, and then I'll entertain a motion to amend the agenda to move down the proclamation and move up some other items. So our next report is the 2016 annual financial audit. And I'd like to invite up Mr. Morrison. Either, it's fine. I think you have to push the button there to be on.
Right, how about that? How'd that work? Okay. Before I get into the audit, there's a comment I made at the exit conference with the administrator that I want to repeat tonight. When the two Princetons merged, you took two strong finance offices and merged them together. And you created a really deep bench when you did that. And it was a good thing because the transition did not go smoothly. We had problems with software vendors, and people were supposed to be dumping data that didn't dump data. And they spent a lot of time recreating and then manually merging two separate entities. That is now all behind you. And what you have now is a finance office with more talent, operating more efficiently, with a higher level of control and built-in procedural proofs than either entity had before the merger. So if there was no other reason to merge, from my perspective as an auditor, that was a great reason to merge. And I'll go forward from there. The audit process is never a difficult process here because we have talented people who know what we're looking for. They anticipate our needs and work very well with us. As an auditor under auditing standards, there's a list of things that I would have to come to you with if they occurred. things like disagreements with management over an accounting principle, or whether we have the right to be digging into certain records and files for audit purposes. If we found that management was out opinion shopping, looking at other audit firms that might say nicer things about them. I say nice things not because of any of that. We didn't experience any of that during the audit, and there will be a letter filed with the clerk indicating that for the record. Our audit basically focuses on major areas of transactional activity, areas where we deem the greatest likelihood that an error could occur and not be corrected, and areas of compliance with laws and regulations, because ultimately they could affect whether or not your financial statements are correct or incorrect. That gets designed based on communications with the staff, prior experience, dollar values of transactional classes, and we build a audit program before we ever set foot in the building. We then do our testing, we gather up evidence, and when we've gotten enough evidence that I'm satisfied and that I can sign an opinion letter saying that I think the financial statements are fair, that's when we stop. If it takes us 3 months, it takes us 3 months. If it takes us a month and a half, it takes us a month and a half. But I'm not signing that letter until we've got the documentation levels we need. Luckily, we managed to stay pretty well in budget. The report in front of you has 2 letters that I have signed based on the work my staff and I have done. The first is an opinion on the financial statements. It takes 3 pages for us to say that based on the standards that you must follow in New Jersey, which is accounting based on state law and regulation rather than national accounting standards, based on those standards, we believe that the financial statements as presented for audit were materially correct. The appropriate accounting principles were used to develop the financial statements, and the principles have been applied consistently from year to year. It's known as an unmodified opinion on a regulatory basis of accounting, if that makes it any clearer. It's the cleanest opinion we can write for a municipality in the state of New Jersey. The second report, which follows the first one, is a report on internal controls and compliance. In New Jersey, the oversight body, the Department of Community Affairs, requires auditors to expand the scope of their engagement and follow another set of rules known as government auditing standards, which are promulgated by the U.S. Comptroller General. Basically, we're required not only to evaluate internal controls as part of our planning process, but to test them to make sure that they've been placed in operation and that they're operating efficiently. We also identify, as part of the planning process, the various laws and regulations that we think are material to your operations, and we come out and test them, and then we issue this report. Essentially, this report says that Princeton's internal controls are adequately designed for an entity of your size. You don't have too many people watching people, which it becomes inefficient, because internal control is always a cost-benefit relationship. You can spend $1 million to improve your internal controls, but if it doesn't save you $1 million, what's the point? So everything's cost-benefit, and we think that you're in a good place with the existing controls. You're not going overboard, but you've got the controls that you need. We tested the controls. They're operating the way they're supposed to, and they're all in operation. As far as compliance, we look at IRS regulations, we look at Division of Local Government Services accounting regulations, we look at pension requirements, we look at laws relating to payroll, benefits, and pensions. We test all of that. We test the levels of surety bond coverage. There's probably 50 or 60 different tests we performed. And the good news is, after everything was said and done, we didn't find anything wrong that results in a required communication. Now, what that means is essentially we found no noncompliance, and what we did find, occasionally we will find a purchase order where a vendor didn't sign off on an affidavit. But if we find 1 out of a test of 60, we don't consider that to be material. And that's the worst kind of things we found this year. So also, that's as clean an opinion as we can write on internal control and finance. We had a chat with the business administrator last week as part of the exit conference. One of the things we touched on was debt. So I wanted to cover that a little bit in this. Your municipal debt right now is at less than half of the maximum level it's allowed to be. Based on the law, which is a bit of an antiquated law, you're allowed to borrow up to 3.5% of the state estimate 3-year average of the taxable value of property and buildings within the municipality. You're at 1.44% now. Going all the way up to 3.5% would put a budgetary burden on you that I don't think anybody would like to see. But what's important is that your debt level has been remaining constant. It actually declined a little bit during 2016. It dropped from 109 million to 107 million. What I find to be and I'm sure this is what the ratings agencies love about Princeton, is that all of your permanently issued debt, your bonds, your loans with the NJEIT are the two big items. Essentially, they're all being paid off within the next 10 years. So you have a short window to retire 75 to 80% of your debt. What's left is projects that you've authorized in the last 2 or 3 years that either have no debt issued at all on them or they're in temporary financing through bonds and notes. The debt has been structured in a way, working with your financial advisors, so that when it's time to issue another round of bonds, you'll be able to do so without increasing the overall debt service burden on the resident. So from a debt perspective, as an auditor, I think you're in a pretty good spot. As far as your finances go, your fund balance went up a little bit this year. That's good because it helps your cash flow. It also gives you cushions for any adverse budgetary impact that future laws, regulations, and state budgets might have. What's important to me is that you're not showing any distress relating to either of the two caps, right? You're not having a problem keeping within your tax cap, and you haven't had any problems keeping within the spending limitations. Those are the areas where communities find themselves in trouble, become distressed, and you start seeing those big layoffs that you saw in some of the more, the larger cities in the last couple of years. You're not experiencing any of that type of situation. As far as pensions go, as you know, the pensions don't show up on the face of your financial statements. We have a 10-page note, everything you ever wanted to know about pensions, and probably 9.5 pages of things you never wanted to know about pensions. They include, though, the share of the PERS and PFRS pension system liability that is attributable to Princeton. The numbers appear rather large, but under the state Constitution right now, if the systems ever went into a bankrupt state, it's the state of New Jersey that would fall liable rather than Princeton. I bring this up, and I bring it up every year, because every once in a while somebody issues a white paper and suggests that maybe the town should become responsible for their debt. Well, if you look at the dollar values in that note and think if you'd like to be the one who would have to pay them off, you are making annual payments to both the PERS and PFRS system. The problem is, if there's a contingency that's going to fall, you don't want to. I personally would rather it not fall on you. Finally, with respect to comments and recommendations, we have no recommendations to make. We're very satisfied with the operations. Your finance officer and I have had ongoing conversations throughout the audit, discussing how things are done, how things might get done a little better. None of it rises to the level where it requires a communication. And in fact, half the time when I bring something up, so we brought that to council last meeting. I mean, one of the first things I did when I got here this year was say, we've got some old local improvement assessment ordinances that should be canceled because you're never going to confirm them, you're never going to bill them at this point. And just pulled out a resolution from the last meeting, and most of them were on that list. So, we're very pleased with the way things are operating. Princeton's from my perspective at least, in good shape financially, and were able to absorb a departure from one of your key finance people this year without missing a beat. And unless there are any questions, that's about all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Liverman?
No, I just want to make one comment, and that is that it's so important for a community to hear good news, and especially when you're a AAA community. I know that taxes are always on our mind. I mean, I pay my share, and I know. So I just want the community to know that we are being careful, and we're trying to do the correct way of managing the funds that we do receive in form of taxes. I know that's always an issue in Princeton. And I want to thank you for giving such a good report. And I want to thank our finance department, led by our beautiful Sandy over here, for doing just such a great job. It means a lot. They work longer hours than we pay them for, and they do just a great job at dedicating their time to run Princeton the way it should be ran. Thank you.
I would just point out that the reason it's a good report is your staff. I'd be here giving a report if it was bad, just as I am giving it because it's good. So the difference between a good report and a bad report is pretty much the quality of the staff.
Thanks. Ms. Krumler?
I also want to say thank you. Congratulations, Sandy. Whoops. Did you hear that, Sandy? Okay, my microphone wasn't on. What you were talking about the debt, that our debt was half of the cap, how does it compare to other towns in general, would you say? Or
It runs the gamut. There are actually some municipalities in the state of New Jersey that have exceeded their maximum municipal debt. And when that happens, they have to go down to the local finance board every time they want to authorize any kind of debt, whether it be for public works vehicles, a roof on a municipal building, anything. They cannot authorize debt without state approval at that point. Some towns are very low. Some of my smallest client communities, because the costs associated with debt issuances can be large in comparative to the amount of debt when you're a very small town, I've encouraged them to try to go to a pay-as-you-go basis. And in those cases, the debt levels are very low. But to do that, you have to be able to wean yourself off debt authorizations until you get done paying off the existing debt. And larger communities, that's just not possible.
well, because we are trying to do that a tiny bit, right? Because we had decided about 3 years ago that we were going to try to shift some of our capital expenses into our operating expenses
Yes.
that are on the,
Oh, yes, and you do that on an annual basis through the operating budget.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see that in, if we've been successful or not.
That's probably a contributing factor to why your overall debt is down $2 million this year. And don't ever sell yourself short on what that means. Every dollar that you can apply directly to capital acquisition probably saves you at least 50 cents in the long run because of the nature of long-term debt and
Right.
the interest that you have to pay every year as you're paying it off.
Right. That's great. And that's what we want to do. And so the same question about the pensions, how do we compare with our pension obligation compared to other towns? I don't really think there's anything we can do about that, right?
No.
So it's just kind of a curious question in this case.
Pension liabilities are all driven by the number of employees and the payroll being paid to those employees. So most towns with police forces at your level have pension liabilities to the police and firemen's pension system at about your level. Most towns with staffing levels that are in the public employees retirement system at your levels have just about the same liability. So really the degree of liability shifts based on, the thing that shifts it the most, quite honestly, is towns that have paid fire departments. When you see a larger municipality with a paid fire department with as many fire officers as they have police officers, that police and firemen's liability is now double, and the numbers get significantly larger. But you know, the liabilities that you'll see in the notes this year appear to be higher, and they are higher. But that had more to do with some changes in the way that the pension system valued the liability. They changed the discount rate, and in changing the discount rate to make it more realistic, the net effect was increasing the net pension obligation. So,
Mayor, I'm sorry, Mayor. I also want to thank Administrator Mark DeShield, because what Councilwoman Crumiller just mentioned in regard to paying without bonding, when our administrator came in, that was one of his key moves, was instead of bonding some of these small items, to pay for them as we go. And that cut back on our debt where we are today. So I just want to thank our administrator for bringing that to us.
And I think while we're giving out thanks, we need to thank our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee as well, because they've done a lot of hard work with council to establish debt limits that we work to, and to look at our budget on an annual basis and help guide us toward maintaining good financial reserves and a good, strong budget. So there's a lot of praise to go around, and I think the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, which is an advisory committee to council, deserves credit as well for where we are.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you again to Sandy and staff and the whole finance team, including our volunteers. We're lucky here to have such great help, so thank you.
thank you all
Thanks
very
for the
much.
great report.
Have a good evening.
All right, and now we have Resolution 17191, which is a resolution accepting the 2016 audit and group affidavit. Is there a motion to approve?
Second?
It's been moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Crumiller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And the next report is on the traffic detours to be utilized during the U.S. Route 206 Stony Brook Bridges replacement project. So I'll turn it over to Jack to let us know what we're in store for.
Okay, so we have three major projects coming up. Obviously, the big one is the Route 206 bridge closure, and that will start actually the night of July 5th. They'll start closing the road, so it'll be closed to traffic the morning of July 6th and go to November 3rd. The next project is while that's being done, the gas company is actually replacing the gas line on a section of 206 in that area, and that's being coordinated with the closure so you don't get a double hit. And then the third project is the Nassau Street water line replacement. That's from Harrison to Snowden. That will be done at night. It'll be done, the road will stay open, but there'll be alternating lanes of traffic. So the biggest part of this is the bridge closure, and there's a regional detour for trucks, and that's from 206 to Route 31 to 95 and vice versa. So the goal is to have the majority of the trucks take the regional detour, but unfortunately we know that that's not going to be the case with all truck traffic. So they have a local detour, and it's broken down into northbound and southbound. The northbound will be Carter Road to Rosedale to Elm back to 206, and the southbound will be 206 to Lover's Lane to Mercer to either Hutchinson or Province Line. And the Province Line part of it, that will be when the gas main is being replaced. So once the gas line is done, the detour will be on Hutchinson. On the drawing you see there, there's a detour that is from 518 to Carter Road. That is no longer one of the detours. The county and Hopewell Borough both had issues with that. There was issues with the turning movements at the intersection of 518 and Carter Road. So that's essentially the slideshow. If you have any questions.
Yes, so I know a copy of this is up on the municipal website, but I don't know how many truckers look at the municipal website. What's the communication that's going out to businesses, to other folks in the community, so we don't have gridlock in July?
Well, there's quite a bit of signage that's going out there, and it's actually some of the signage is up already, trying to give some advanced warning. As far as notice to businesses, I'm not sure what's being done there. I can check and get back to you. I don't have that answer tonight.
And are you working with Waze? I thought I heard at one of our meetings, someone talked about that I don't know if anyone from,
I know Deanna has been doing a lot with the coordination with the state and the county.
do you know what I'm talking about, the Waze
Yep.
app? Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Just, because I know that some municipalities are plugged in, so I hope we are. I think we are.
I don't know for sure, but I would assume that she would be. Yeah, and then also we're notifying some of the trucking agencies that this will be coming. We're trying to get as much advanced warning. Obviously, they're going to go where they're going to go, but we try to make it as painless as possible.
Right. Mr. Lippman?
Yeah, I guess this will still be in place during school time in September?
Yes.
And are there alternate routes for bus pickup and all that stuff? The buses?
Yeah,
and-
a lot of it, like some of it will be local traffic will be able to get down some of those roads. Obviously, they can't go over the bridge, but for local traffic, they will be able to get down all of the side streets in that area, and obviously any of the residents that live on those roads. So that is being coordinated with the school, with garbage pickup, recycling.
And
That's
is
all
there,
being coordinated.
is there a, like, I was thinking, is there like a, we have like an emergency number that just pertains to this section that the state has or someone has, for instance, if there's a problem or something, like let's say we're just too backed up somewhere or something due to this project, is there like a 1-800 help me or something? I don't know.
I'm
No.
not aware of that. I don't,
Okay.
Chief, are you aware of anything?
Ms. Carmona?
Well, because it seems like these maps look like really good plans, but nothing really matters except what's on GPSs now, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I guess we play it by ear. I know I've been telling people there are a few people who've asked me, well, I want to put up no left turn signs in my neighborhood because anticipating they're going to go, because I can look and see it might even go down my street. I've been just saying if traffic, and maybe this is a question for Nick too, I mean, if traffic gets really horrible and there are jam ups, I guess we can adjust, right? We can
Yep.
put signs and,
Part of this is to kind of see how things go. I mean,
Yeah.
there was talk about putting temporary traffic signals at some of these intersections.
oh, so you can do that?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
not part of the initial plan. It's really kind of, let's see how it goes
Yeah.
and then make adjustments where
Yeah.
necessary.
Question, Jack. Thank you. And has there been any communication from NJAW about the water main replacement on Nassau? Why that's been delayed so long? I mean, the original start date was the 9th of June, and now we're seeing that the construction is going to go on into the school year. So have they been in touch with Deanna or with?
Yes, even the water company can't get a DOT permit in a timely fashion. And that's been their holdup, is getting the DOT permit.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad we have.
Question.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Miller?
Jack, while you're I'm not sitting there, but while you're still here, what's going on with the Harrison Street Bridge? I noticed when I came across it today that the date for the work on the Harrison Street Bridge had changed.
So there was a one-day closure that was scheduled for this past weekend, and obviously anticipation, trying to get that done before the 206 bridge was closed. But because of the anticipated weather on Saturday, the county canceled that, and it's next week it's going to be closed for the one day.
Can you shed some light on the nature of the work that's being done there?
I know it's repairs to the bridge. I'm not familiar with the specifics.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad we have a lot of folks here tonight at the meeting to help get the word out about the 206 closure. It is going to be a major change for traffic in and out of town during those months. So it'll be nice when we have a bridge that we can feel comfortable driving over when this is done, but I think the process is likely going to be really painful, so we just all have to hang in there and try to remember that 206 is going to be closed and plan accordingly. Mr. Limron, do you have any reports tonight? Mr. Miller? Ms. Crumiller? Ms. Quinn?
Just a brief one, Mayor, from the Bike Advisory Committee. They met on June 22nd, and we heard a presentation from officials from the Lawrence Hopewell Trail, which I'm sure many of us have enjoyed living in Mercer County. And they are close to finishing their initial loop, and once that's complete, they are looking for ways to connect to other towns in Mercer, chief among them our town. They suggested that we join a group called the Circuit Trails, which is a initiative of the Delaware Valley Regional Planning group, and we can do that by resolution. So it's the key to getting grants for trail development in our community, and I'll be following up with that and getting a resolution on a future agenda. Thank you.
That sounds great. Thank you. I have just a couple reports. The first is just a follow up to the 206 bridge report. As most of you know, one of the bridges that's being replaced dates back to 1792. And the Historic Preservation Commission of Princeton has been working really closely with DOT and with the State Historic Preservation Board to make sure that the new bridge is as historically accurate as possible. So they're reusing a lot of the existing stone on the face of the bridge, and members of the HPC have actually gone out to the quarry to look at the new stone they'll be using. They have a masonry expert that's helping. This is a major project. Our volunteers from the HPC have been going above and beyond. They've been having meetings every week, just particular for this project to make sure that what gets built is something that the community can be proud of. So I want to thank them for their ongoing work on that, and also to thank the state for their openness and cooperation on this project. I also had a report that Mr. Liverman should probably be giving, but this is an idea that Lance had when we had, I think, one of our first meetings with President Chris Eisgruber, and you'd asked about what the university was doing to offer jobs to members of the community. And the university has really stepped up, and they've been working with the Princeton Public Library, and there's going to be 2 upcoming sessions, one on July 6th from 10 to noon, and then the other on July 12th in the evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Then that's going to be in the New Technology Center on the 2nd floor of the Princeton Public Library, and there'll be a workshop to help with resume writing and advice on applying for a job, and then to also walk people through the new jobs portal at the university so people can see what jobs there are and to be on the list when there's future openings. And I think that's it for reports. So now I'd like to see if there can be, well, actually, can I do I just want, I think I have to amend the agenda for the proclamation because I forgot it. So we'll amend it to make it cleaner. But can I just get a show of hands of how many people are here for the residential clusters ordinance? Okay. And then who's here for the meters on University Place? Okay. And who's here for the S1 and S2 service districts? All right. And the cleaning services resolution? Okay. And was there anybody else here for anything? You could just be here for the whole meeting, but if there's something particular you're here for, we can bump that up. What was that? Oh, Carnahan parking. Okay. What number was that? That was number 7. Okay, great. All right. So, if there could be a motion to amend the agenda so that the next items in order are the proclamation, ordinance 2017-46, the public hearing on ordinance 2017-24, and then 2017-43, 2017-45, and then the resolution 17-195.
So moved.
Okay, there's been a motion to amend the agenda. I did put in the proclamation, thank you, by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Mr. Miller. And Madam Clerk, did you get all of that? Okay, great. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so now we'll go back up to the proclamation. It is Princeton University's Summer Chamber Concert's 50th anniversary. So we have a proclamation to celebrate this anniversary. And if you want to read the text of that, I encourage you to go on the website. So congratulations on the 50th anniversary. And encourage everybody to look at the Summer Chamber Concert program for this summer. All right, next is ordinance introduction 2017-46, an ordinance revising the Code of Princeton regarding residential clusters and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there someone who can, oh yeah, Lee, thank you.
Thank you, and good evening. What I'd like to do is just provide you with a little bit of background as to what led to the proposed revisions, and then go through the revisions, if that's okay. So back in 2011, a developer came in with a subdivision to create 20 lots on the Princeton Ridge, just off of Herringtown Road, near the intersection of Herringtown and Mount Lucas Road. And when he came in, staff asked him if he was at all interested in clustering. And at the time, he really wasn't, but a discussion began. And we thought that the site would be better served by a cluster for some good reasons. Primarily, what clustering does, just in its general sense, is allow a developer to put all the housing, to cluster it in one area. Usually that's in an area that has the most suitable land for development. It allows him to leave undisturbed environmentally sensitive areas such as wetlands and streams and steep slopes and the like. So what we've done is come up with a way to encourage that, and that the developer in this case was interested in providing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the site that was talked about, because I think it's illustrative of what could happen. The ordinance amendments would apply throughout the community, and there are a couple of sites, and we'll talk about those when we get to the ordinance as well, that it would apply to. But just so that you know, in general, what we have in the existing zoning code is a provision that allows the developer to cluster. It then currently provides a density bonus, allows him to get additional units as an incentive to cluster for providing additional open space and access to that open space, as well as an active recreation area. So if we could, on the screen, we're going to go and show you, I'm going to orient you as to the site, I hope. Okay. Okay, why are we having a problem? I thought it was F5, function F5. Maybe it was 6. We're having a little technical issue.
We're going to get some help.
Yeah. I hit F5 before. No?
So just to explain the process here, once we get the presentation up, we'll hear from staff, we'll take questions from council. I know there's folks here who probably want to speak, so we'll open it up if there's comments, and then we'll bring it back to council.
Professor Crumiller, we thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So the screen that's up there is just to get everybody oriented a little bit. This is the property that we're going to talk about. It's 90 acres in size. This is Harringtown Road. This is Bund Drive. Mount Lucas is here, and Route 206 is here. And at the top of the screen, this is Montgomery Woods. Harringtown Lane is here to the east. To the south, this is Stone Hill Church. There's preserved open space here. There's preserved open space way off to the east as well. Along Mount Lucas are some single-family homes, and then there are offices and retail, as you can see, between Mount Lucas and Route 206. The property currently is located in what we call the RA and RB zone. It does allow for single-family homes on 3 and 4 acres. As you can see from the aerial photo, the site is heavily wooded, and it does have some environmental features, and I'm going to try to switch to that. It's not working very well. Yeah, I'm trying to. Oops. And it's not. A new computer. I think rather than trying to do the graphics, we'll just talk. So the site has wetlands, as I had indicated. It has steep slopes, and it has streams that run diagonally through it.
Is there a USB to put a mouse in?
That's when I had my presentation, and they switched computers. They didn't want to set up the other one. Because I need this. I don't know what that's doing.
See if we can hit duplicate. Oh, there. Now.
Well, where's the thing?
here, just find it on here now, so now it's showing. Just, now this screen is what you see up there, so,
I don't want this screen.
I know.
So
but-
can I X out of this?
Yeah, here, minimize it or whatever. Oh, here, drag it over and make it go. Yeah, there.
Okay, now this should pop up.
Okay.
Here we go. So this map shows the environmental features, and what you have is in brown are the wetlands, in yellow are wetland buffers. The purple shows you some of the steep slopes. The orientation on this is the same. This is a misnomer on their map. This is Herringtown Road, not Poor Farm Road. Mount Lucas over to the left, One Drive located right in here. So you can see the site has some environmental constraints with a fairly large, flatter area located in this general corner of the site, which is where the cluster development would be occurring. The applicant originally came in, as I had indicated, with a plan for 20 lots, and I'd like to show you that, I hope. And again, with Herringtown Road located over here and Mount Lucas up at the top, this is the conventional site plan that was for the 20 lots that originally came in, and you can see where the streams are and the wetlands, so that the 20 lot would have had a lot of environmental problems with its development. The plan that the developer came up with is a 30-lot cluster. The yellow shows you the 30 lots. You can see the steeper sloped areas located here, the streams running through here, a proposed detention basin here. And as I had indicated, one of the amendments was to allow for an affordable housing parcel in the future, and that's located here, and that's about 3 acres in size. So what this does is this cluster provisions would effectively preserve most of the site, which is important as it's one of the largest remaining tracts on the Princeton Ridge. It places development on the least environmentally sensitive land, and it provides an opportunity for a future affordable housing site. As I indicated, it would create 30 lots. They're each about a half acre in size. When we originally started this project and it came to council, we were hoping to preserve 60% of the site. This plan preserves a little bit more than 74% of the total site. It does have the dedication of 3 acres of land for future affordable housing as well. And it also increases the buffer. Under our existing cluster ordinance, any cluster development needs to have a 40-foot buffer around the perimeter. In this case, that buffer has been increased to 100 feet in size. I do have to stress that this cluster development is illustrative. It may not be what we get. It may be what we get. It was put together as a way to help visualize how the ordinance itself would work. So unless there are questions on some of the background, what I'd really like to do is just focus on some of the ordinance provisions that were there. So with that, we can get rid of the maps.
I have a quick question just on that last map. So there's a green break there that you can see, which I assume is to provide access to the open space? Is it right there where you're...
In this instance, this is the 100-foot buffer that I was talking about. All the green would be open space. Obviously, we haven't done site planning as to whether this green is open to the public, but the thought was that the larger piece maybe either would become a public park or have trails that would make it accessible to the public as well. That's a site plan question. It will return to you similar to the subdivision that you had on Snowden, where you had to decide whether or not to accept, I think it was roughly a 7-acre donation of land and make it a park, or just have trails going through it. That decision rests with council. Okay. I have also with me Derek Bridger, if there are any other questions, but what I'd like to do is just walk you through the ordinance itself. As I indicated, we have an existing cluster ordinance, and it currently provides density bonuses for open space and recreation areas. So the first change we made is to Section 10B 189, which is on page 2 of the draft ordinance. And in that, we just noted that we changed the purpose of clustering, which there are many, mostly dealing with preserving the site, preserving open space, allowing development on the most environmentally suitable areas, is to change 10B 189A to allow for innovation in affordable housing opportunities. And we think this does. It identifies a site for 3 acres, and we'll talk about that site and how that would apply generically to anybody who does the clustering. But that was the first change we made. Then further on page 5, we define affordable housing. And that's basically, we're following the Council on Affordable Housing guidelines in terms of what makes a unit affordable. So these units, when they're developed in terms of the affordable component, will be affordable to low and moderate income individuals. At 10B 191.2, on page 6 of the draft ordinance, we've added provisions that provide a density bonus of up to 30% for providing land that is affordable, that will be made available for the development of affordable housing. In order to receive this bonus, the land to be dedicated must have the following. First, the municipal council, you folks will have to accept the dedication. Then the dedicated land must be in a sewer service area because of the density that we're talking about, or we'll be talking about. You need to be able to serve the development by sewer. It must have frontage on an existing or proposed roadway, have no more than 20% of the total portion of the site that's being dedicated for affordable in what was defined as steep slopes, wetlands, wetland buffers, flood hazard areas, or riparian areas. So what we built in was to make certain that the land that was dedicated was not just land that you couldn't build on. We recognize that there may be some streams or wetlands, and that's that 20%, but that 80% of the site could be developed in the future. And then fourth, that it be free from any environmental hazard. And by that, we were worried that what happens if somebody wanted to dedicate to us land that had been contaminated with an oil spill or something else. And this would all have to come out as we do the site plan. On page 7, we talk specifically about what sites would be eligible to have this type of bonus. Any residential cluster can get the bonus for the open space and the pathways and the active recreation area, but only sites that were 75 acres in size, so we focused on larger tracts in the community. As I indicated, we originally began the process thinking 60% of the site should be preserved as open space. The ordinance now calls for 70%. I indicated earlier that the existing cluster only requires a 40-foot buffer around its perimeter. If you're doing this type of development, it bumps up to 100 feet. Realize that you're buffering residential from residential. The density has changed a little bit, and that was the theory in providing for the increase in buffer, to provide a little bit more, but that it should not be totally out of character at all. The affordable housing density bonus provides that for every 1 acre of land dedicated to the municipality for affordable housing in excess of 1 acre, the developer receives a 15% bonus. The total bonus that you can receive under this category is 30%. The cumulative density bonus allowed cannot exceed 50%. So if you take advantage of the bonus for the open space and the active recreation and the pathways, or for this affordable housing, the highest you can get should not exceed 50% in total. As I indicated, currently you can get a bonus of up to 10% for public access 10% for open space in excess of 50%, and up to a 15% bonus for dedicated public active recreation area. A couple of smaller changes that we made to the ordinance. Throughout the ordinance, you'll note we changed the word township because the cluster ordinance was only in the township, in the former township, to a municipality. We did want to talk, I mentioned, there are some other sites that may be eligible for this. We've identified at least one other privately held site that has more than 75 acres and could be developed. It would probably see an increase in density from around 100 units to a maximum of 150. It is located in a 2-acre zone, so the density bonus is not that large. The clustering is also permitted in the E2, in the E3 zone. And if an educational institution wanted to take advantage of this, they could. It's a little harder for staff to tell you what that impact may be. If it's developed as single-family homes, it's fairly limited because, again, if you're developing single-family homes in the E zone, it's a 1-acre base density. However, those zones do allow multifamily and townhouses, and they don't have a predetermined density. It's all based upon the setbacks and the FAR that's allowed overall on the tract in terms of developing it. So I can't tell you whether a 75-acre site would be redeveloped and have 50 units or have 300 units at this point in time. The only site that really came to mind, and I'm sure we'll hear from some of the people in the public, was the Springdale Golf Course, which the university has indicated they have no plans for at least the next 10 years or more. If we need to revisit the cluster provision, we can, but I think if you want to, you need to think about in terms of how we provide affordable housing. Typically, we do it in a variety of ways. In some cases, it's 100% affordable, and the town assists financially in the development of it. More traditionally, it's a 20% set-aside that basically is in return for a density bonus. A developer is allowed to develop, but with providing 20% affordable housing. So this is a slightly different way. It just says we are trying to get land that we could then develop. No plans have been made in this case for the 3-acre site, whether it's a 20% set aside or 100% affordable or something in between. The thought was it's almost like a land banking to say, as we know, the municipality's obligation for affordable housing is not going away. We're now in round 3 and 4 of the Council on Affordable Housing procedure. This was a way to ensure for that future that we have some land that we could develop affordable housing. I'm going to stop there. I'm sure that you have some questions in terms of how the ordinance is structured.
Ms. Cormiller?
Yeah, I can't find exactly where it is, but did you say that there's a bonus of 50%?
A maximum, so that if you add up all the bonus criteria, you can't go above 50. If you added them all up, I think you would exceed it, but we put in a cap of no more than 50% of any of the categories total.
So what's the top total for this property here?
50%.
And that's 50% of?
Again, what we call the as of right, as I showed you briefly, there's a subdivision for 20 homes that are all 4 acres or more. Actually, that plan was slightly revised from what originally came in 2011 because we noted some variances which would not be as of right.
Okay, so that makes sense.
So the 20, and if you get up to 50%, we're now at 30.
Okay. Okay, so I have another question too. One of the things that makes me nervous about this is the 3-acre affordable site. We don't really, you guys have looked at it, but we haven't really had, say, a developer look at it and say, oh, this is developable. So I'm worried about that because we didn't do an environment, like here, we did all this. You know, we had a couple really vigorous, it seems to me, tests done by, you know, to satisfy the DEP. But we're not, are we doing that for the 3 acres? And what happens if
Well, the wetlands on the entire tract have been identified, and the developer in this case has what's called a letter of interpretation, which is what DEP issues when they say, here's where the wetlands are. So we know that. We've looked at the DEP list. We're not aware of any hazardous material that was dumped on the site or whatever. Some of your questions really go to if and when a site plan comes in, the planning board can ask for some more information on that. Obviously, the area is wooded. There is frontage on a public street. Sewer would have to be brought specifically into the site to deal with any development, but it's in a sewer service area, so those are all things that could be done. They may affect either the cost of the affordable development or the number of units that we ultimately end up on there. But we've tried in the ordinance to build in some safeguards so that while nothing is 100%, we feel comfortable that the site could be developed.
Well, so could we have, as part of the deal, that the developer has to promise that they understand that it's developable? Because it seems like a good opportunity. I mean, since it's a developer who's benefiting from this application, could we not have the developer promise that they not to say that they're going to do it, but that it's their understanding that that is developable? Because another question I always have is why is the developer doing this? Giving us 3 acres of property in exchange for 3 additional less than 3 acre units. And so I just have to say I feel a little bit. I've always wondered about this.
A lot of that gets more at a site plan condition. The planning board could, put that in or require that, he make a statement so that people, when he sells homes, know that there will be an affordable development in the area. We've built in what we think are reasonable standards to make certain that the site is developable. I think ultimately that developability will be what we end up putting on there in terms of the density and the requirements there. So I can't speak to the economics of the developer. I can tell you that when you look at the cluster, which we just took off, he wasn't utilizing that land. I don't know how much he's really losing by not having that 3 acre. I mean, there's value to it without question, but under the cluster provision, he's putting it in the most developable area. Where that 3 acre site is, there's already an existing single family dwelling. So we know, at least some of it is developable. That house would be knocked down, be removed. In fact, that's what raised, I think, originally one of the concerns about can we put in a standard that it not have any hazards, so that if the house had asbestos or whatever, we could require that all be removed. So we've tried to build in what we can. There's always going to be unknowns, but I think that this was, as I probably should have indicated, not only did it come to council originally over a year ago, it went to the planning board, and the zoning amendment review committee met with the neighbors. There's still concerns from the neighbors, but the thought was that this was, again, an innovative way to provide affordable housing and still allow for cluster development in an environmentally responsible way.
Lee, could you talk about the as-of-right plan, which was on the screen so that would mean that the entire site would be housing 4 acre lots in the area, in wetland areas and steep slopes. Would that be sort of a slam dunk because it's as of right, or in the site plan process, it would obviously be put up to greater scrutiny?
It's never a slam dunk, but in general, there were no variances that we identified. They would not be allowed to put a house in the wetlands anyhow under existing conditions, but the lot itself could contain the wetlands. When you looked at the 20 lot, the long cul-de-sac roads, no open space for the public. We just felt environmentally it made sense to cluster it in the southeast corner. It's a little hard to see, but when you look closer at the topography of the site, that's a fairly flatter area than the rest of the site. Our ordinance we commonly refer to steep slopes at like 15%, but by ordinance, you can build in 15%. You can't, you need a variance to build in 25%. Very little of the site is the 25%, but that purple area on the environmental characteristics map, that was mostly 15 to 25, but mostly closer to the 15%. So we were avoiding that as well as much as you can. It was just, the thought was, well, you're increasing the density by 50%, but it clusters it and puts it in a more environmentally sensitive fashion on the site.
And also, if you could refresh my memory, when this came to ZARC, the planning board sat as ZARC for the hearing on this. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah, I forget. It's been a while. This has sort of been on hiatus for probably 4 to 6 months anyhow. But the planning board and ZARC, I think we held 2 or 3 public meetings with the neighbors and the developer to try to work out the ordinance that you have in front and build in the protections that we've been talking about.
And in addition to the neighbors, there were other groups that spoke in favor of this, as I recall, Friends of Princeton Open Space and
The Stony Brook Millstone Watershed, because in general, I think they feel if the site is going to be developed, truth in advertising, I think they would prefer to see it stay a park. I don't know whether we have the funds to do that, but if it's going to be developed, I think all the environmental groups, there's even a memo from our own environmental commission that saw the wisdom in clustering the development. That's part of the hiatus that occurred in the development of the ordinance. When they first came in, the developer did have a letter of interpretation on wetlands. It was about to expire, and the planning board and ZARC asked the developer to renew that and restudy that, which he did. The wetlands did change slightly, but we now have a current LOI as well.
Thank you, Lee.
Any questions on the side? Okay. Thank you. I'd like to open it up then to hear from members of the public who are here, and then we'll bring it back to council for a possible vote on introduction. So I'd like to start with Bruce Affron, because you signed the sheet, and then we'll open it up to other folks. And we ask that everybody please limit their comments to 3 minutes. And if the ordinance gets introduced tonight, there'll also be a public hearing and another chance for a comment too.
Thank you. I wish I would request a couple extra minutes since I represent a lot of the people sitting here, if that's all right. I won't be very long. Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm Bruce Affron. I represent members of the Herrington Lane Association. That is the residential organization that actually is at that street, Herrington Lane, that Mr. Solo pointed to. I do know that there are many people here from the Montgomery developments, among them my good friend Hannon Isaacs, a fellow attorney who is going to speak to some issues, primarily dealing with water questions. This is a major rezoning. You know, Mr. Solo, without meaning criticism, I think did not really give credit to some of the major changes that this imposes. To begin with, we're going from a maximum ordinary conventional bonus of 10% to 50%. That's a very, very large jump. We had a 10% density increase, a bonus, everywhere we had clusters. This now puts it at 50% as the maximum. So that in itself is a massive change in how we view clustering in this town. We are looking at a change that is coming about because primarily, and Mr. Solo made this very clear, I think, one developer had a problem. The Landwind site, the Landwind Corporation, wanted to come in with a 20-unit site plan. Now, I've gone over the site plan, and as Mr. Solo said, it has environmental problems, but that's understating it. Approximately 25% of the site, as you saw on that map with the darker gray streaks, is steep slopes. At least, in my judgment, 4 of the proposed sites are almost entirely blocked as steep slopes. Probably 90% of those sites are steep slopes. They can't be built on. There are wetlands, as Mr. Solo said, throughout. There are streams throughout running diagonally across, and we saw that. At least 4 sites would require. Now, Mr. Solo is quite correct that one can have wetlands and steep slopes on a site. But the steep slopes will block at least 4 sites. The wetlands on other sites will require roads and driveways traversing the wetlands in order to open up those lots. DEP has to approve construction on those wetlands. So in answer to Councilmember Quinn's comment, it is not a slam dunk. It's an extraordinarily difficult thing to build roads and driveways on known wetlands. So we've identified, and we'll bring our experts in when we need, if we need to, I hope we don't need to, probably 8 sites of that 20 that cannot be built on. So what we're talking about is a developer who, as Mr. Solo said, has environmental constraints. Virtually all of this site will have to remain undeveloped because it's undevelopable. So what we're doing is we're giving this developer probably a 100% or more increase in the number of units it can build in exchange for preservation of land that can never be built on as a practical matter. So we're giving the developer, who probably can build maybe 12 units at most, we're giving him, I think, 30 units. And these are going to be high-priced luxury units. All this does is imperil a site that has been undeveloped for decades, and for very good reason, because most of it can't be built on. And so we're giving, virtually tripling, the number of units the developer can build in exchange for preserving site that he can't build on anyway. We as a town get nothing from this rezoning. We're handing a gift of probably $20 million in profit to a developer in exchange for a commitment to preserve land that will always be preserved because it can't be built on. Now, in answer to Councilwoman Crummello's question about the lower income site, the affordable housing site, it is constrained. And I can show you right here. This is, I know the audience can't see this, and if we have to, we'll come in with better charts. I was asked to do this on relatively short notice. This lot here, it's called Lot 1.11, would be the affordable housing lot. You can see the speckled area here. That's wetland. And you can see this dotted line, that's wetland buffer zone. So this part of the site is already constrained by wetlands. So in answer to Councilwoman Crummello's question, it is constrained. So we are sitting in a situation where we're asked to do a major rezoning, changing our whole concept of clustering. Mr. Solo acknowledges this is one of the last remaining undeveloped parcels in the town of a large extent. Springdale is a golf course. It's highly developed. And we're giving a developer an enormous increase in what it can build. We're talking about tens of millions in profit in exchange for nothing, because this site would normally be mostly undevelopable anyway. The only place on this site this developer could build is where he wants to cluster and triple the number of units that are probably available. At most, he could probably build 8 to 10 units, at most, in the area where he wants to cluster 30. All this is a welfare program for one developer. We are encouraging the destruction of one of our last undeveloped sites in this community, inside a major preserved area, which functions as a unique, fully linked ecological zone of hundreds and hundreds of acres. In addition, my clients in particular bought next to what they understood for the last multiple decades was 4-acre residential zoning. They didn't buy next to an industrial lot or an office lot. They're not coming here complaining, my gosh, an office is going up on an office zone lot. They bought next to a lot with 4-acre zoning. Now they're going to have high density on virtually half-acre lots next to what for decades they understood was 4-acre zoning. So there are people burdened who invested in property based on long-standing zoning assumptions in this area. We're seeing a developer being handed tens of millions of dollars in opportunities in exchange for preserving land that must be preserved by its very nature. This needs more study before it's introduced. My clients are prepared to meet with staff, to bring our experts in, to properly show the overlay between the zoning plan of the 20 units and the actual constraints that exist. You didn't see that yet. We're prepared to meet with staff, with our engineers and our experts, and explain the problems here. This is not ready. This major rezoning is not ready for introduction at this point. So we're asking that there be no introduction of this ordinance tonight. We're asking for time, 30 or 60 days, however long it is, to come in with our experts and fully review this with staff. There's no urgency for this project, and it really is not ready for introduction. I know one or two people in my group may have some brief comments, and I just want to thank you for your time. I certainly would be here for questions. And if we could have an informational session here with our experts come in, we can explain these issues in greater detail. But certainly we don't think it's ready for introduction at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I ask a question? I know we don't. No,
Yeah, that's fine.
Are you sure? I know we usually don't ask questions when you guys speak, but Bruce, so if I'm hearing you correctly, that means that the neighbors are okay with the current plan. I mean, with the plan that was there for decades. The as of right
units
plan, the
20
neighbors are
lots.
fine with the 20 lots.
Well, let me say this. The as-of-right plan in
Yes.
reality is not an as-of-right
I know,
plan.
but as we have it now, they're fine with the way it is now. I'm just saying.
If there were 4 or 5 4-acre lots built alongside
Yes.
their property line,
Yes.
that would not be a major burden.
Okay.
And, there's really no major buffer built in
Okay.
there either. So, yes, if that were the case, that's low
Okay.
density, that would
Yeah.
not be an issue.
Okay.
I'm quite confident there would be no more than a handful of lots anyway because of the constraints on the rest of the site.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'd like to open it up for anybody else who'd like to speak to this ordinance. And just come up to the mic, and if you could state your name and address, and then when you're done, if you can come just sign this sheet on the table so we get everything spelled right for the minutes.
Sure. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Hannon Isaacs. I reside at 16 Castleton Road, Princeton, New Jersey, but that's kind of a trick because I live in Montgomery Township. And I'm actually here to talk about, for myself and members of what we've developed on these issues here and elsewhere, something called the Blue Spring Road Association. And these are along Blue Spring Road from Princeton Avenue to River Road. There are probably 6 or 7 housing groups, mostly in the nature of townhomes and condos and apartments. And so, we have some concerns. We're the southernmost point of Montgomery Township, and I guess that also means Somerset County. And things happen there. And one of them is we've been aware of the Landwin application for several years and have followed it closely, and some people here and others not here have come to these various meetings to present and listen. I'm not going to repeat anything that my brother Bruce Afrin said. I'm an attorney. I'm not literally representing anybody here other than myself and some people in our association who I know what their concerns are. As I understand what the planner said to you tonight, this proposed zoning change does not approve a particular development. It's basically an illustration of how things could work here and in several other places. My concern is several. First of all, cluster zoning, great idea for lots of reasons: environmental, visual impact in a positive way. It's efficient. I don't have a matter of fact, I guess in one way I live in a cluster zone in my community. What I'm concerned about is misapplying it, taking it and applying it where it should not go. The biggest issue, the biggest single issue, and why I'm here, has to do with environmental issues, water runoff in particular. These steep slopes, if you've been out there, I and my neighbors live underneath that. And what's going to happen with the development of roadways, and however it's going to be collected into retention basins and distributed, no one knows what's going to happen off that ridge once this property is developed. And if anybody tells you that they know, they're not telling you the truth. It's an unknowable issue with slopes and groundwater. The issue of groundwater pollution is a big deal. If you look at the maps, and I'm sure you have, this is a major wetland up there. It happens to be beautiful and lovely. I've walked up in that area. Many of us have Autumn Hill Reservation. It's a fragile ecosystem, and we need to have the Princeton Council and its subgroups treat it that way. We're worried about runoff, major amounts of runoff. We already have groundwater issues in our area all across and up and down Blue Spring Road. Some of the homes, by the way, that are in our association are within the requisite number of those people have to be notified in case they want to come forward and say this is going to be a problem. So what I'm basically saying is we have environmental issues, an ecosystem that we know is fragile, groundwater pollution concerns, runoff concerns, and superimpose that on the public policies of housing density, zoning policy change, cluster zoning, affordable housing, dedicating open space and dedicating it to the public. And by the way, is this dedication going to be permanent and non-changeable? Whatever that acreage is it going to be permanent? Aside from the issue of reserving housing for the affordable housing. And so I fear that the zoning change will basically change too much in an area that's too unknown and volatile, and it's going to be a study in, we did it, now what's going to happen? We'll notice it down below, depending on what you all decide from above. I'm coming from a neighboring township, and I say thank you all for your consideration. By the way, our town committee knows about this issue. We've brought it to them and said, can you have our engineering staff and planner look at this, keep it on your radar for purposes of, because we feel like the township ought to be protecting us just as much as we're asking that of you. And we have notified them. They certainly do know about it. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
And if you just come and sign this sheet here. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. My name is Steve Jardin, and I live at 68 Herrontown Lane. And our house is one of the ones that borders the property under discussion. Several of my neighbors are here also. We're strongly opposed to this. I think it's going to completely change the character of our neighborhood. When Herrontown Lane was developed, it was developed very smartly. There were 24 acres and 12 houses that were to go there. Each house was put on 1 acre, and the remaining 12 acres were used to form 3 buffer areas, so we were totally buffered from any existing housing that were there. And we assumed that, the field behind us, the real estate agent, and everybody assured us that was zoned 4 acres residential. And we just assumed that they would put in buffer areas as we did in Herrontown Lane when that was constructed. Now to see this map now where you have 30 high-density houses right up against our backyards, that's just completely unacceptable. That's going to greatly reduce the value of our houses. It's going to just, reduce the experience for us sitting in our backyards, and it's just totally out of character with the neighborhood. So we strongly oppose this. And the other thing that if you look at that map that he showed, they have this huge 100-acre area, and all of the houses are clustered together right against the Herrontown Lane houses. Why can't, if they're going to do the cluster, if you're going to approve that, why not put that in the center? Why not have open space all around the new cluster? I understand the only reason they're not doing that is because this is a cheaper alternative. But believe me, you get what you pay for. The people that are going to move in there, they're not going to want to live, all clustered right up against the existing development. I think it would be much better for us neighbors. It would be better for the new residents if we were better separated and there was a larger buffer area between the existing houses and the new ones.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this ordinance? Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Tom Letizia. I'm an attorney with Pepper Hamilton, and I represent Landwind Development Corporation. I guess we're the bad developer that's being referred to this evening. Just quick couple comments, because you have heard me speak before on this matter. That is the cluster ordinance amendment. First, with respect to the comments from Mr. Afrin, he makes a forceful argument, but unfortunately, it's not based in facts. And for example, he mentions we're going from a 10% bonus to 50%. I believe your staff has advised you that under today's cluster ordinance, a developer taking advantage of your cluster provisions can obtain a 35% bonus. What this amendment would do would increase that to 50% if the developer provides lands to the municipality for affordable housing. So please keep in mind, we're going from 35% to 50%, not 10% to 50%. Also, in terms of the as-of-right plan that has been submitted and reviewed by your staff and determined to have 20 suitable lots, again, that's already been reviewed and determined by your staff as meeting your ordinance. So this issue about wetlands and steep slopes, again, it's a smokescreen. It's already been reviewed, and it's already been determined. The most important thing I'd like you to keep in mind is that what you're being asked to do in terms of introducing this ordinance is to consider a policy. We're sort of conflating site plan and subdivision issues with this ordinance adoption. A lot of the issues that are being raised may be legitimate, but that's for the planning board to review and discuss at the time of subdivision and site plan. What we're talking about this evening is, as noted by your planner, Mr. Solo, is a policy decision on whether you would like to modify your cluster ordinance in order to obtain some land for future affordable housing. So this isn't a one-way street. And the only way that my client could obtain this additional bonus is if we provide this additional land, and if we can show that it is suitable and developable pursuant to the standards that are set out in this proposed ordinance. So this is not just a one-way street getting the benefit for my client. My client will be happy to do the as of right, which I have told you on numerous occasions. If, as a matter of policy, you determine this is not what you would like to do, that's fine. Just let us know, and we'll move on. And we're ready to defend our plan with the neighbors and Mr. Afrin or whoever else wants to come forward. So I just ask you to just keep in mind that what you're hearing this evening from some of the residents and Mr. Afrin are site plan and subdivision issues, which are really for the planning board to determine. And throwing out facts about wetlands and steep slopes, trust me, they're not accurate. And again, I ask you, if you have some questions about that, to please ask your staff to comment on that, because they have reviewed the documents that have been on file for several months. In any event, I don't want to take up any more time, but just ask you that I hope that after you consider the information you've heard this evening, you'll proceed with introduction of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll sign the...
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this ordinance? Okay.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. My concern about this project from the beginning has been how many lots are really developable that are as of right lots. So you may not be getting the increase that you thought you were getting. You may be giving a much bigger increase to the developer than they would be getting if you were discounting as of right lots that are developable. So I'm just concerned about that. And I think that we need more information, quite frankly. I'm also wondering about the affordable lot and what kind of a good lot that is to live in if it's a wetland lot. It may not be a great spot to live in. So I think that's something to consider as well. We want to make sure that the affordable unit is in a good site. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to bring the conversation back to council. I had a few questions just based on what we heard. So can someone just clarify what the current percentage bonus is? Because we heard two numbers thrown out there. And what, under the current ordinance, what is the percentage?
Under the current ordinance, it's a 35% bonus.
Okay, thank you. And then can you also clarify how the ordinance is written in terms of what the bonus is based on? So if you had, for example, the site that we're looking at, it has 20 lots when you divide up the acreage. Is the bonus based on the 20 lots, or is it based on how many of those lots are developable?
A little bit of both. Let me explain that. You've heard the term as of right. We start first with the zoning. The underlying zoning is the RA-RB. Most of the site is in the RA. It requires a 4-acre lot and a single-family home. On that 4 acres, you can have steep slopes, you can have wetlands, you can have a stream running through it, you can have riparian land. What you can't have is a house site located in the wetlands or steep slopes being 25%, not the 15 to 25, but 25 or higher. So that if you have a 4-acre lot and 3 acres are wetlands, and you can show that you can locate a house within that 1 acre of uplands, that lot counts as a buildable lot, because that's how we've always used the determination. There's nothing wrong with having your backyard being wetlands or a stream or whatever. So the developer starts with what we call the as-of-right plan. He needs to submit a plan, which the concept was the one that you saw for 20 lots. That establishes a base density. We have looked at it at a staff level, and it seems to be okay. We're open-minded. If somebody wants to say it's not 20, it's 18, and here's why, we'll consider that. What I would caution you is those are site plan issues or subdivision issues. What's really before you is the ordinance itself. If the ordinance in terms of providing the bonus for affordable housing as a policy makes sense, that's what's before you. It's the planning board that will hear the testimony on what the baseline density is, whether it's 20 lots or 12 lots or 16 lots. That's a planning board function when they review the cluster provision. We've done that before, and they'll continue to do it. So that's not really before you. A lot of the comments you heard, drainage, it's a concern. No, I don't want to belittle it, but it's a site plan concern that Mr. West will review at the planning board. Those of you who have been on the planning board know we're going to get probably about 2 inches or more of drainage calculations to ensure that not only does the site not flood the new homes, but the surrounding homes. In general, our policy has always been, and our regulations require, that the water runoff from the site will be less than what it currently runs off. This is a tricky site because it does slope down to Montgomery. The density that we're talking about, 30 units on 90 acres. That's 1 unit, 3 acres. Montgomery Woods is probably 6 to 8 units an acre. So it's a different type of development. Harringtown Lane was developed as a 2-acre zone. The homes, however, are on a 1-acre lot, and what's being proposed is a half-acre lot.
Okay, so what I was asking, and I think you answered this, is that if it's shown, and this would be through the planning board process, that there's only some fraction of buildable lots, the density bonus would be based on the buildable lots, not the theoretical number of lots.
If there's a 4-acre lot and it's all wetlands, we would not count it as a developable lot. It would only be 19 in that case.
Okay.
You know, I just want to jump in there because the PEC also expressed doubt that all 20 lots were buildable. So I think it's a good question, and I shared that question.
It was, but again, that's really at the planning board level. If you recall, though, when we were doing this and they raised that, that was on the old LOI, because they had some questions. The developer did agree and did get a new letter of interpretation from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So we know where the wetlands are. We know where the steep slopes are. So those are all things that we can. It may be a matter of interpretation. Can you fit a house in? But when you're looking at a 4-acre lot and you need a 5,000 or 8,000 square foot area to place a house and some driveway, it's not going to be that difficult, I don't think.
I think as far as council is concerned, we need to very carefully consider the issue of a specific project site plan approval as opposed to a policy issue that's before council. The policy issue that's before council is, do we want to encourage cluster housing? Do we want to try and tie cluster housing on sites that are large to the conveyance of some part of the site for future affordable housing in the municipality, and to the preservation of open space in the municipality without council and the taxpayers having to be burdened with the cost of acquiring that open space. I think it's very easy to conflate the two issues, given the example that was put before us tonight, but one part of what was put before us tonight is not really the business of council. It's the business of the planning board. The part of it that is the business of a council is, what do we want in the way of cluster housing? How do we want to use it? And does it serve a useful purpose for the municipality? And I think that is the issue that's before us.
I second what Mr. Miller said, and for me, the key piece, and I have a couple of questions for Mr. Solo. The key piece here is the affordable housing parcel that we're going to get. Land is at a premium in Princeton. I notice on the map that there's a relatively small wetland area that appears in the north. I'm terrible with compass directions, but it appears to be a relatively small area on the set-aside area for affordable housing. And I also wondered, Mr. Solo, if you could tell us if any other areas in town come to mind that are built on steep slopes in the 15% range, and areas that have wetlands. So any neighborhoods come to mind or specific tracks?
There are a couple of developments, mostly off...
I think you need to turn your mic on.
It should be.
Get closer.
Mostly off of Drake's Corner Road and up by Province Line, where there are some slopes and some wetlands. There is development in the ridge, and that's the area where there has been some. Even then, we try to avoid the more steeper areas. Unless it's a really old development, the DEP regulations don't allow development in the wetlands. There's a wetlands averaging plan that can be done and some other little techniques, but generally you can't locate a house in the middle of a wetland. So if we can get the screen back on, I'm going to try it again. I didn't have a lot of success last time with electronics. No, I got it on mine. He's got it. Can you turn it back on? Because I have the critical map, and I think that's a good example to show.
Council can see it on our monitors. It'd be nice if it were up there too, but
So,
it's at least working here.
oh, he turned it off.
Meanwhile, if I could ask my second question while that boots up. So are there other limits? How many units do you think on the affordable site how many would that site support?
That wasn't me. It's really a function of what density council ultimately decides. We set it up so that it would be future. As you can see from the screen where the pointer is, This is the area that we're talking about. That would be the 3-acre piece. This is Mount Lucas Road, Scarlet Oak Drive, which is where these townhouses are fronting on. Blue Spring is off of the map. So we're looking at this area, and as you can see, there is a stream. Here are the wetlands. So the wetlands are towards the east and at the far edge of the property. Obviously, we would probably cluster something, whether they're townhouses or apartments. We haven't gotten that far, but I think it's useful to take a look at, here are the wetlands and their buffer areas, and you can see the streams. Similarly, the steep slopes are here. The one gentleman said, put the development in the center of the site. That also puts it into the steepest slopes.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, so I think I was the only person to vote against this on the planning board, but I'm gonna vote against it tonight also, and I want to give you several reasons. The first one is environmental. You can argue about this, but I think that the 20 houses on that land is going to have a smaller environmental impact than 30 houses. I think most of the time, houses on a big, humongous lot like that, they don't landscape the whole property. They usually leave it in its natural form, and I think ultimately there's less disturbance to the environment, and I think fewer trees. I just feel in my heart that it's better for the landscape to do the as-right zoning. I also think it's a little bit less likely that they'll be developed. I think there's a smaller market for the houses that would be sold. I mean, and that brings me to my next point. I feel like what we're doing here is, instead of building 20 houses for the 0.01%, we're building 30 houses for the 1%. It's not like we're doing anything for housing diversity that is a goal of ours. It's putting housing that's half-acre lots with big houses on them in a place that's not walkable to anywhere. It's not the kind of housing that we want to promote. So I guess those are the main two reasons that I'm going to vote against it. I also think, the third is, I do feel conflicted about the affordable housing site, but it's not a great site for affordable housing, being way out on the edge of town.
Yeah.
Mr. Lerman?
Yeah. Thank you. One comment was made by, I think it was Mr. Jordan. Yeah. He mentioned that there may be a reduction of the price of his home due to this development. Do you have any feedback on that?
I'm sorry, Lance, could you repeat the
Yeah,
question?
he mentioned that because of the development, this cluster, it could cause a reduction in the price of the homes on Harringtown Lane.
I don't know if I'm really an expert to qualify on the economics of it. I think what he's referring to is Harringtown Lane is a lovely, lovely development. I understand their concerns. It's a 2-acre zone. The houses, though, it's a cluster development, just as this is, except the cluster is on 1-acre lots. This is proposed on half-acre lots, so the lots are smaller, but they'll be newer. So I'm not really qualified to be able to tell you what a house in the new development would be worth versus a house on the 1-acre, an older house.
The other question is Mr. Isaac mentioned the water going down towards Blue Springs, and that it may cause, I'm assuming, flooding, possibly basement flooding and so forth. Is there a way that we can have, I mean, I'm just saying if it occurred, like a retention basin or something down at that section of?
So as he indicated, the houses they're having problems right now with water.
Mm-hmm.
He's correct that, obviously anything you do here will increase the runoff. But what they do is the detention basin, and this again is only a conceptual plan that's on the screen now, but they have a large detention basin down prior to the water getting to Montgomery. So it would have to be designed, and as Lee indicated earlier, it's designed to reduce the amount of runoff that's leaving the site. Right now, the majority of this site drains towards Montgomery. So they're getting all the water now. Obviously, as you develop it, you increase the impervious, and you're getting more runoff. But with our stormwater ordinance, they would have to provide a reduction in the rate of runoff from the site. But it is a concern, and that would be, again, a planning board issue when we review the actual application.
And the planning board, maybe Councilwoman Kremiller and Councilman Quinn, was there a majority vote for this to be brought to us?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there was.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was the only person to vote against it.
I don't know if they actually formally vote. We do a consensus because
And
this
made
will get referred
made
back to the planning board.
recommendations.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to clarify the process too, if this is introduced tonight, it would be referred to the planning board for review before it came back to council?
That's correct. They need to review it for consistency with the master plan.
Right, okay. Mr. Miller?
A couple of things have been said this evening that concern me. One was Mr. Isaacs talking about the runoff on Blue Spring Road. This town has had experience with a street named Spring, and usually when there is a street named Spring, there is something that was there before the street called a spring. And my guess is that there was a spring that ran where Blue Spring Road is at the present time. And I wish Mr. Isaacs was here to talk a bit about it, because my guess is that whatever they're experiencing, oh, he is here. Well, whatever they are experiencing probably is attributable much to what was there before those units were built. There's been a lot of hyperbole used tonight. Small lots, houses on small lots. Half acre is not a small lot in Princeton. There are many, many houses in this town that are built on a quarter acre, some even on smaller. If you go over to the eastern section of town, half acre to 3/4 of an acre is a standard. And they're not small lots. And believe me, the people that live in them would not call them high-density housing. A lot of hyperbole about issues of runoff, and I'm falling into the same trap that I didn't want to fall into when I started my comments on this, and that is, we're here to deal with a policy issue. The people on the planning board, including the representatives from council, can deal with the specifics of site plans. The issue, as far as I'm concerned, that's before us is the question of, do we want cluster housing or not? Do we want to encourage it? Do we want to encourage public open space as opposed to private open space? And do we want to encourage the opportunity for affordable housing or not? Those are the issues that I see. Somebody else, not me, because I'm not on planning board anymore, can deal with the issue of whether the site plan makes sense or not.
I would, if I could, Mayor, with deepest respect for my colleague, Ms. Krummiller, have to disagree with her assessment about the environmental impact, just based on the fact that our environmental commission and open space advocates looked at this plan and endorsed it. 70% of the open space is retained by clustering, and I'm not sure what the percentage in the as of right part is preserved, but I'm guessing that it's nowhere close to 70%. And which is not to say that this is an easy decision by any matter, and this is our, a year and a half with this or so, and it's been back and forth to ZARC, and in the end I come back to what Mr. Miller said, which is that, sure, we're not going to get a lot of diversity in housing stock out of the cluster, but we are going to gain 3 acres of land for affordable housing. And you can argue, and I'm not sure that I would argue against whether it's an ideal site for affordable housing, but it's land that's being offered for what could be 100% affordable housing. And it's worth noting that we have affordable housing that's even farther out from the center of town that people have lived in for decades now. So that's all. I mean, I think that we would have welcomed, and I think we heard the comments of the neighbors both at the smaller ZARC meeting and at the planning board meeting, and I'm not sure whether there's value in again revisiting the suitability of the as of right plan and whether that would affect our decision or not. But this is not an easy decision, even though I tend to support this because I think it's better environmentally and it allows us a site for affordable housing.
Thank you. Is there,
Okay.
yep, go ahead, Ms. Miller.
Well, I was reading, is there another memo from the PEC besides the one that's in our packet?
No, I think that was the one. I think their initial memo talked about the expiration of the LOI as being a concern, and at the initial ZARC meeting where this was discussed, the smaller meeting, not when the planning board met as ZARC, the applicant agreed that he would delay action on that until he could get an updated LOI, which, as Mr. Solo reported, has now been obtained.
Okay, I mean, just because this memo doesn't exactly read like an endorsement, I don't,
That's from a year ago.
I know, so that's what I wondered when I just wondered, do we have documentation? I mean, did they take a vote and endorse, or?
I was not the liaison then, so I'm not sure.
I believe I was the liaison then. So I would separate the two issues between the policy piece and the site plan. So
Well,
I would,
well, because
I know, but I would just want to sort of represent what the PEC was saying, is that they support the cluster in concept. And I think that's what Mr. Quinn was saying, that it is, if even just looking at the roads that would be built and the amount of impervious surface with the roadways, if you're developing the whole site, the streets in and of themselves would probably be, I don't know, 3 times the amount than they are. And so just for that reason, I think that clustering is considered more, the more environmentally sensitive option, especially,
Right.
and I think that's what they were saying. That was like their point 1 was we support clusters, and then point 2, we have concerns about this particular site and whether you can really carve out 20 units here, and we want some documentation from DEP. That's what the
Right, I mean, so what I would like clarified is 4-acre zoning necessarily worse for the environment? I mean, I think that this exact issue is going to be similar on any site that where the zoning is 4-acre zoning and half-acre zoning. So,
yeah, and I think Wendy Maker has been here.
I know
and
Wendy.
she-
I know,
and
and
she has said. I mean, I think.
I know.
I think
know.
it's a pretty.
To me, it's not clear at all, and I understand. But I just wanted to say that's one reason where I feel like I am voting against it as a policy, because in general, to me, it looks. A full disclosure: I grew up in a house on a very steep slope with an old growth forest, and we didn't have any grass, and we didn't cut down any trees ever, we didn't have a tree service. They just, the trees just took care of themselves and fell down. I guess they never fall, none of them ever got sick when we were there. But So I have a really strong feeling about these houses and like this as opposed to a house with grass growing. And so that's why I feel this way. But so that's why I think it's, for me, it's a policy and it's a specific
Okay.
vote.
All right, I think that we've heard from everybody and that we're going to bring this back to council too if it gets introduced, but I would ask for a
Second.
motion to introduce. Okay, so it's been moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
And the ordinance is introduced by a vote of 3-1. And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on August 21st, 2017. And there will be a meeting in between at the planning board. And I don't have the exact date for that yet, but that will be put up on the website. And is there noticing for the planning board meeting? Or no? Okay. All right. So please check the website for that, and you can also sign up to get alerts too if you're interested in attending that meeting. So thank you. Next, we're going to move on to the
2017-43?
no, we're doing 2017-24.
Okay.
An ordinance by the municipality of Princeton establishing a 3-hour metered parking zone on the east side of University Place between College Road and the Berlin Crosswalk and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Are there any questions from council before we open up the public hearing for this ordinance? Okay, so I'd like to open up the public hearing. This is for 2017-24. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to this ordinance? This is about the 3-hour meter parking on University Place.
Hi, good evening. I'm Mindy Richardson, the general manager at McCarter. You all heard our opinion at the last meeting, and I just wanted to once again stand here and reiterate that we are completely supportive of establishing the short-term parking on University Place. However, we believe that the short-term parking should be established in the spaces that are south of the crosswalk instead of the spaces that are north of the crosswalk. Quickly, just that the different look of those spaces will make it easier to identify which spaces are short-term and which spaces are long-term. The pay station would allow for easier payment of the higher rates for short-term parking. When you're talking about $3.75 for 3 hours of parking, being able to use that credit card multi-space station would be a lot easier. And the spaces south of the crosswalk are closer to the bar and restaurant that they're designed to serve. I do know that we had somebody out surveying people who were parking in those spaces. My understanding is that very few of them were dinky riders, which was one of the things that was discussed at the last meeting. And then finally, just wherever the short-term spaces are established, we would humbly request that that not be implemented until the spaces, all of the spaces are back online, because currently about a dozen spaces are still waiting for completion of the Lewis Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we know the timing of that, of when those spaces
Yeah,
are?
probably about half of those will probably going to open up very shortly, within a week or so. The remaining half probably sometime in August, maybe towards the end of August. But definitely by the end of August, they will all be open.
Okay. And if this ordinance passes tonight, then it takes effect usually in 30 days? Is that the timing? Or is it immediately? Doesn't have to get published and?
It's usually upon passage and publication, but that doesn't mean that they have to, I'm sure we can work something out in terms of when you...
Yeah, by the time we
swap
change
out
the meters and signage, it's probably going to be a little bit of time.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the actual rollout will take longer than the ordinance itself becoming effective.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Jim Nahn. I own the Dinky and the soon-to-be opening Cargo restaurant. Just want to make 2 points. The first is the most important. over a year ago, the university had presented the concept of short-term metering in this area, and we were hopeful at that time this would have been long ago put in place. So I asked the council to expedite, in other words, approve this tonight and get this in place. The pressure on the Dinky so far, and it will increase with cargo opening in a few weeks. Secondly, as far as north of the Berlin Walk or on the elbow of University Place, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. However, at the meeting, 2 meetings ago, at least as far as this has been discussed, the angled-in parking and versus the parallel parking on the elbow, neither is ideal. I've done both myself. I think the angled-in parking is a little simpler, and given the turnover in the spaces, the short-term parking perhaps would be better served north of the Berlin Walk as proposed. But again, I'm more interested in having some short-term parking in that neighborhood for the use of my patrons and any others who might be needing a turnover of parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. And this area is being looked at by the parking study.
Right. When this was discussed by the parking subcommittee, we kind of thought, well, first of all, it's being done as a pilot to see how it works. Obviously, we felt there was a need for some shorter term parking. Felt that the angle spaces were easier to get in and out of because of the more turnover. But you're right, this is being studied as part of the parking study, and there may be recommendations that come out of that would change how we do parking in that whole area. So we thought that let's get this going as a pilot, and then in September, when we get the results of the parking study, any potential changes would come at that point.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing?
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. Hopefully, there is going to be a promotion plan for the Dinky, and hopefully the ridership will be increased. When we all started this, there was a commitment that people could come in from town, park on University Place, and walk over to the Dinky, as opposed to coming into the Dinky parking lot. Right now, the Dinky is still suffering, so we don't need necessarily the parking spots right now, but I would hope that you all would keep in mind that hopefully the Dinky will be coming back as we need mass transit, as we have more traffic, as Alexander Street begins to evolve, as maybe Springdale Golf Course is developed. There are a lot of ifs and a lot of things that can happen. And so I just want you to keep in mind that what you do now, we may need to come back at some point and say it needs to be changed a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you. That's certainly something the parking consultants have said over and over, is that you don't fix the parking and keep it the same way forever. So I imagine we'll put in some sort of checkup on that to continue to look at this area and others. All right. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of this public hearing? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Yeah, Ms. Krumiller?
Yeah, well, I'm on the parking committee, so maybe I'm biased. But I think it was hard to work things out between the competing uses. But I feel like that this is a good pilot, and so I'm supporting it.
Do you want to make that a motion to introduce?
Sure,
Second.
I'll introduce it.
All right, it's been seconded by Mr. Liverman. Are there any other comments before we do the vote?
This is an introduction.
Yeah, it's a motion to approve. Oh, right, sorry. Can you just clarify your motion?
What did I say? Did I say?
I think I might have made a mistake.
Oh,
so it's just.
I make a motion to approve the ordinance.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Krumiller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any further discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we come to 2017-43, which is another parking ordinance, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton reestablishing 2-hour non-metered parking on the east side of Carnahan Place and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance, if there's anybody who'd like to speak to it. All right. You don't have to. I mean, I feel like we've heard you. So seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council and see if there's a motion to approve.
I'd like to move this forward, make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Crumiller. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. And I think this is a good example of sometimes you do a pilot and it doesn't work, and you go back to the good old way it was always done. So thank you for your patience. All right, next is 2017-45, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton adding personal services to the list of permitted uses in the S1 and S2 service districts, establishing off-street parking requirements for said uses, and amending Chapter 10B of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And I'd like to start by just opening up the public hearing.
Mayor, just before you do that, I did want to note one change in case there are members of the public who wish to comment on it.
Okay.
The planning board, when the ordinance was referred to it, recommended a minor change to the table of parking requirements. There's currently a separate standard, parking standard for coin-operated laundries of one parking space for every one washing machine. The planning board recommended that that be deleted. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't think that's the sort of change that would require you to reintroduce the ordinance, but to the extent that there may be members of the public who want to comment on it, I wanted to make sure that change was in the record.
Thank you. All right, and with that, that was for a coin-operated laundry that you
Just to clarify, there's still going to be a requirement for coin-operated laundries. It's just that that's folded in now to the parking requirement that applies to all personal services.
You don't need to build a parking deck in order to open up your coin-operated laundry. Okay. All right, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and see if there's a motion to approve.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Miller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you. And this was a case of it being brought to our attention that we had too narrow a definition for our service zones and made sense to broaden the definition. So glad that worked out. All right, next we come to Resolution 17-195, resolution authorizing the award of a contract for cleaning services for various buildings within the municipality of Princeton for 2017 and 2018 to CNS Cleaning Company Incorporated for the bid amount of $134,460. I know there's some public comment, but can I just get a motion to approve so we get it on the table and then we can have discussion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Crumiller. Are there any questions or comments from council? Ms. Crumiller?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's here from Public Works who received, how many bids did we receive?
We received 2 bids. We received 2 bids.
2 bids?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. DeShield, can you just talk through the process and what happened and
Sure.
What's before us?
What we're looking at here are cleaning services for the municipality. In our regular review of the services that we provide to our residents, we evaluated different ways in which we could provide the cleaning service, which included looking at an internal service and also looking at whether we would bid out the project again. We decided to bid the project out. We received 2 bids. Of the 2 bids that we received, the low bid When compared to the current vendor that we use, we saw significant savings. Therefore, we're recommending to council that we move on to the new vendor. Based on the bids that were received, it's an estimated savings to the municipality of about $36,000 a year.
And did we receive a bid from the current vendor?
The current vendor is actually under state contract.
What does that mean?
They have a contract out under the, that they contracted with the state. So it was open to them to take a bid, but they're also under a state contract. And it's also important to note the vendor that you're usually who you see is a subcontractor. We actually contract with the state through a company called Access.
Okay. So I'd like to open this up if anybody would like to speak to this. You can come to the microphone, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Steve Cook. I'm the Executive Director at ARC Mercer. I've been there for about 17 years in a leadership position. Currently, I'm the CEO for the last 10 years. We are the subcontracting vendor that provides your cleaning services. I did want to come in tonight. Normally, I get to come in to a public meeting and talk about the great things the ARC Mercer does. We serve over 1,200 people a day with developmental disabilities throughout Mercer County. We create vocational opportunities, day program opportunities, transportation, homes. So today, I did want to come in and represent a couple of points before you vote on this contract. And I think the first thing I'd like to do is take you back a little bit in time. With respect to the merging of the two municipalities, at that point a decision was made to realign the Public Works Department and bring in the ARC Mercer through the state set-aside program to do the janitorial services. This is also done in several other municipalities. Mercer County, and particularly the state of New Jersey, has set aside all of their janitorial for people with special needs, creating well over 1,500 jobs and saving well over $22 million. And every time that we've gone into a situation, I will be completely frank, it never works smoothly. Anybody that you know that has a special needs child or a special needs family member will tell you this isn't just a routine business. The job is to create a partnership between the entity that's contracting with you and trying to create jobs in a community for people with developmental disabilities. The highest rate of unemployment is with people with disabilities. These are good jobs. They pay federal prevailing wage. I'm here tonight to represent the 4 employees that would lose their job if you vote to give this contract to the other vendor. Not because they're stellar, but, and I would tell you from the beginning, when we merged, there was a lot of things that needed to be dealt with, but there were some mitigating factors, some of which were on the ARC to set it up, and some of it were through the transition. So in every single town that we've gone into, it's always about forming a relationship and a partnership to be able to make this work. And we've done it in Hamilton, we've done it in Lawrence, we've done it in Hopewell, Mercer County, and we've created really great opportunities for people. The prime example of how this relationship works is how people respond to it. And I will be honest with you, in the merger, when a lot of public works people had to lose their job or be demoted, there was friction. And I went through the logs, going all the way back to that merger till today, of the communications between my disabled staff and their supervisor and those that were left behind. And there was some animosity. There were some comments I won't read here tonight, but there's definitely friction. And that, when you understand janitorial contracts, you don't clean to 100%. There will always be complaints, there will always be issues. A world-class cleaning, according to very strict standards, would rate over a 90%. That means you missed 10% of things. I brought the reports with me. Back in January, I had the ability to meet with the administrator and had a great meeting. We understood things needed to get done, and to be honest, I feel bad for the position the administrator's in because he's got people complaining to him and he's got to fix the problem, and I understand that.
Part of the solution was to sit down and try to create a communication system and to evaluate whether or not we were doing a good job with an independent entity, which is Access New Jersey. I have 5 reports from them. Most of them average 89 to 90, and in any other location that's considered world-class cleaning. The problem is we get a lot of complaints, and some of that are legitimate, and some of them are friction. And my hope was that over the last 5 months we could create the dynamic where it's clear we're going to try to work through this and try to create an environment where we're not just cleaning a building, but a community is creating jobs for people with developmental disabilities. Over those 5 months, we made some progress. There are a lot of emails that I have from Public Works stating some trash cans are missed and this wasn't cleaned and that wasn't vacuumed. But we do over 30,000 trash cans a year with developmentally disabled folks, and we're going to miss some, and some things aren't going to work out. But the difference between a partnership is how you respond. And I'll tell you, right after we met, we got a report that one of our consumers who's developmentally disabled was pregnant and had a child in a recreation center. Let me tell you, I was devastated. But like I said, if you deal with special needs people like I do every day, these things happen. It's the commitment of your partner and how they respond. The police department did a collection for the child. That's a community partner. The response from Public Works, why didn't you know that that person was pregnant, and what'd you do to clean the biohazards up? That is someone who's really got us on the ropes. But it's the difference of a community partner. It's friction, and I get it. I'm not here to say vote for it or not, or that we're wonderful, or that the relationship can work. But the truth is, that's really the difference in these contracts. It's not about cleaning a building. Let me give one more point with respect to the numbers. I think our bid was about $160,000 and change. It goes through Access New Jersey. They get an 8% cut, and they put some kind of G&A profit of like 12% in. The next highest bid was $149,000. Then you only had one other bid, so you really only have 2 bids. Now, my agency is a $20 million agency. I wouldn't put the landscaping out without 3 bids. But let me give you something to think about. The low bid is not $136,000. It's even lower. If you read your documents, it's actually an 18-month bid that puts it in at $89,000. Now, if it's federal prevailing wage and you do the math, it's not even physically possible to pay the people a wage and give them benefits. I would suggest 2 things. Go back and get a few more bids. But the ARC Mercer can also bid on this without the Access Group, and we can remove the 8%, and we can negotiate on the other issues. I can get the number down to make it work, and it will be comparable to legitimate bids. That may not fix the problem of the relationship between Public Works and our cleaners. And so that's the other piece that needs to be fixed. My recommendation would be, why don't you give us some time, and as this is a governing body that sets the policy, you guys say, look, we'd like to see this work for the 4 disabled people so we don't have to vote to remove their jobs. My commitment is I'll work on the numbers. More importantly, I would ask that we get a chance to sit with the Public Works folks and get rid of the animosity that was created when a lot of them were demoted or lost their jobs and try to make this work. And if it doesn't, as I told the administrator before, I'll leave, but give me a fair shot. So my 3 points are, it's a partnership. It is documented that we actually were doing a good job. And with the Public Works helping us, they would tell us that 90% that we're going to get, what's really important to you?
I think we can, thank you.
Okay.
Well, but can I ask, I mean, because we're in a tough spot too, because we have a really positive view of our Public Works Department. You know, we have good relationships with them, we're on committees with them, and I was told that they tried to work it out, and they already did what you're asking for right now. So can you
I can
respond to
tell
that?
you, the 2 things I can tell you is I've got the reports right here that were done by Access that show that we were inspecting your properties and did a good job. The second is I've got some logs and backup information over the last emails from the communication last 5 months.
Never mind. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, is that your view, Mark, that they've already given, that they already did?
To be very honest with you, I think it's probably the conversation we have, and I don't know if it's appropriate to have that kind of conversation about the level of service. Really, we had to make a decision on the service we wanted to provide it. We found we went out for bid. We've indicated that we would be looking at other alternatives when we have a low bid, and that's what's before you.
Okay.
And I don't know if someone could, unfortunately, I hear them in regard to bidding, but I don't know if once a bid is presented to us at a number that someone can come back and give you a lower number. I don't even know if that's legal, but I feel, I wish they did put something in earlier. I mean, that would have been.
Can I
Yeah,
ask
Mr.
a
Quinn?
question for our council? Say we vote this down, what happens? Do we go out to bid? Can we go out to bid again? Or I feel like as a member of the Public Works Committee that I don't feel that I had enough information at the time to make an informed decision. So I would be inclined to vote no on the resolution right now. But I don't know what the legal impediments and what the...
Yeah, typically, and I haven't seen these particular bid specs, so I would need to confirm that. But I'm sorry, is that better? Yeah, I haven't seen these specific bid specifications, so I can't confirm this without seeing them. But normally in all of your bid specifications, you reserve the right to, you either award to the low bidder or you reject all the bids. So if you're not inclined to approve this resolution tonight, awarding it, my recommendation would then be reject all the bids, just to make sure that you're keeping it clean.
One comment I do have to make, and I think we should look closely at this, because we have gone through a process with staff in terms of evaluating which the best way to go. Part of that was going out to bid. We went out to a public bid. Everybody had an opportunity to go out for that public bid. At this point, then to say, now that you know what the bids were, to have another person come in and be able to, redo the process, I think is unfair at this point. And I would encourage council to really look at that. I think it would just be an unfair process.
I would add to that, I too am on the Public Works Committee, and it's clear that the impetus here came after an evaluation by the Director of Public Works Infrastructure, and he's not here tonight. And I think it would be rather unusual on our part to reject something that he's put forth without hearing from him. So I wonder, can we carry this over for another meeting?
That would be, I was about to make that suggestion. Because even when you reserve the right to reject all the bids, usually you still have a basis for it. So I think it would be important, rather than, take a vote tonight if there's, Councilman Quinn, I hear more that you need more information rather than your mind is made up one way or the other. And I think certainly the point is well taken that Mr. Huff's not here tonight to address questions. So that would be my suggestion, is why don't you put this off to your next meeting?
And do we need to vote to table then?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the vote to table or just carry it. I would just carry it. I mean, the motion should state specifically you want this relisted on the next agenda, because technically when you table something, that means it's gone.
Okay.
Never to come back. So you really wanted this relisted for the next meeting.
Okay, which I believe is July 10th?
Second.
July 10th. Okay. So it's, there's a motion from Mr. Miller to move this to the meeting of July 10th. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we'll be taking this up again on July 10th. All right. And I feel like that was the end of everything that we moved up. So we're going to go back and pick up ordinance introductions. No, we did, wait. Yes, ordinance introductions. Oh, on the Franklin Avenue, which I'm recusing from. So, Ms. Crumiller, here's the gavel for you in case you need to knock anybody over the head.
Okay. The next ordinance is 2017-47, an ordinance by Princeton authorizing the acquisition of the Franklin Avenue parking lot, block 21.04, lot 27, tax map of Princeton pursuant to NJSA 40A:12-3 at SEC. Public hearing will be on July 10th, 2017.
I'll move to introduce.
I think you have to open it public. Do you open it public? first?
No, we can do it either way. Okay, is there anyone here from anyone who wants to speak? Okay, do I hear a motion? Oh, I already heard a motion from, I'll close the public hearing.
Yep.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Miller and a second by Councilman
Liverman.
Liverman. Can you call the roll?
Yes.
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 The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, I'll introduce well, Liz is coming in. The next is an ordinance 2017-48, an ordinance by Princeton authorizing contribution from the Princeton Affordable Housing Fund to partially reimburse Community Options for its acquisition of the Princeton Municipal Tax Map and/or fund its renovation and creation of a group home project in consideration of COI implementing affordable housing restrictions on the property so as to provide Princeton with affordable housing credits toward Princeton's fair share affordable housing obligation. The public hearing will be on July 10th.
I think that's our longest ordinance title ever.
Wow.
But this, I want to say that Community Options has been a really great partner for another group home that we have in town. And this is a nice opportunity another nice opportunity for the municipality. So are there any questions on this, or is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. Anybody from the public like to speak to it? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on July 10th, 2017. Next is 2017-49, an ordinance of the Mayor and Council of Princeton concerning salaries and compensation of certain personnel of the municipality of Princeton. Are there any questions from council?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments yet?
Yeah, I have a question. Unfortunately, I've been unable to look at any of the ordinances on my screen tonight because my iPad is just showing up everything as a black screen. So it's not clear to me what we're approving here. Who are the certain personnel?
What we're approving this evening are adjustments to the salary ordinance that allow the 1.5% increase. And what you'll see, there are certain ranges in which people are at the top of the range. We had to adjust the range to allow the 1.5% increase. And then some administrative changes where we're either adding titles or changes in titles that have been approved previously, just making corrections.
But there wasn't anything higher than 1.5%, Bernie.
Are there any other questions or comments from council? Are there any comments from the public? Kip, come on up.
I just wanted to make a suggestion. I don't know a lot about how we do salaries, but I haven't heard much about merit increases, and I get concerned about across-the-board increases. I know there's inflation, it's been very low. I would like to see more merit-related increases. And I think that that way we can reward people who are really putting out and send the message for those who aren't. And so I'd like to see some rethinking about that, because I see our total salaries inflating like crazy over the years, and I'm very concerned about our long-term budget situation, and I'd really like to focus more on merit. Thank you.
Thank you. We can take that suggestion back to the Personnel Committee, but I do have to say our salaries line item in the budget has not gone up. I think it's virtually flat this year, or is it lower than 2016, right? But your larger point is well taken. All right. Any other comments from the public? All right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on July 10th, 2017. And next we come to the ordinance public hearings. We've already done the first one. So we'll pick it up with 2017-37, bond ordinance providing for various capital improvements in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $6,562,590 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $5,980,180 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance part of the costs thereof. Are there any comments or questions from council before we open up the public hearing?
Just like to clarify, this doesn't include any of the library requests?
It does not, and that ordinance is not on tonight's agenda because we have a quorum issue with that, so we have to wait for Heather and Ms. Howard and Ms. Butler to return, and then we'll take that one up. So I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey Avenue. I'd like to bring up an issue I brought before to you, and you've already talked about it tonight. But I think, and I know that the administrator feels that everything here has got a 5-year life, but I would like to suggest that there are things in this bond that are not 5 years, and they really should be on our cash flow. Now, I know things are tight, and I know you're trying to get to that point, but I don't know how you're going to get to that point if you don't start pushing into that point really hard. And I'll just give you some examples. For instance, I would question whether ballistic vests have 5-year life. I would question whether cybersecurity intrusion detection has a 5-year life. I would question whether general park maintenance at Community Park South has a 5-year life. I would question whether general maintenance of signs and traffic paint has a 5-year life. I would question whether ash tree treatment has a 5-year life. And I should mention, too, that I just did my elm, which cost me almost $1,000, and it's for 3 years. In 3 years, I have to inoculate my elm again. I don't think that you get 5 years out of an ash tree treatment. I don't think that computers and technology software and repairs have a 5-year life. I don't think that replacement of self-contained breathing apparatus, packs, and cylinders has a 5-year life. I can't imagine that these things can sit on the shelf for 5 years and still be just as good as they were before. And I don't imagine that repairs of pavers has a 5-year life either. So I'm just putting that to you, and I know this is a legal question, and I know that you wouldn't be proposing this if you didn't need to in terms of cash flow. But I'm just really concerned that you're putting off paying for things that we should be paying now out of our cash flow, which means we have to pay it back later. And as your accounting guru pointed out to you, there is a cost to postponing paying for things. And when you, no matter how low the rate is, when you put off and borrow to pay for things that really should come out of the cash flow, in the end, you lose. We all lose. So the sooner you can move into getting away from some of these small items out of a bond situation, I would really recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeShield, did you want to?
If I can make 2 comments. One comment, all the items on here are useful life, have a useful life for 5 years. Actually, our bond attorney reviews all of these and certifies in terms of the useful life. in accordance with the established practices. But one thing I will say, what we do for some of the small items in here, there's about $200,000 in cash that are applied against some of the smaller items that you'll see in here that we use on an annual basis. So even though you may see some things here, and we've talked about this in the past, we do set aside additional cash to pay cash for those rather than going out for bonds.
Ms. Krummeller?
Well, right, and is it my understanding is that we are trying to do this more, but if we did it across the board in 1 year, we would have to raise taxes. And so that's why we're not doing it 100% for everything. Because I totally agree with you that we should we should wean ourselves from this.
And I do want to point out, since the question was raised, in terms of what you can and can't borrow for, that's all set by statute, and then the statute actually lays out what the number of years, the life of each type of item or improvement is.
Think there's a difference between what's legally allowed and what's.
But I did want to just clarify
that we're
again
not not breaking any rules.
And I'll also say that we do try to stretch the life out of the equipment that we have and everything else.
Witness that computer that right there.
Yeah, and so I think when we often do use those things for 5 years, if not more. But thank you for your comment on that. And there's nobody else to, we've cleared the room. So
I make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-39, an ordinance authorizing Princeton to enter into a pocket park easement agreement with Avalon Princeton LLC pursuant to NJSA 40A 12-4. Are there any questions or comments from council? Kip, are you interested in, well, I'll open up the public hearing formally. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing.
I'll move.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller. Seconded by Mr. Miller. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-40, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton to designate a handicapped parking space within the Washington Oaks at Princeton Development on Brickhouse Road, and to amend the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance is approved unanimously. Next is 2017-41, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton reducing the weight limit on Lover's Lane from 5 tons to 4 tons and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Nope. All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing.
I'll move it.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Mr. Miller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-42, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton to establish no parking on the first and third Wednesday mornings of the month in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood to accommodate street cleaning operations and to amend the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, 1968. I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance, and seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. We already took up the next one, so we'll skip to 2017-44, an ordinance concerning sewer service charges and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance, and seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Krumiller. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 And the ordinance passes unanimously. And next we come to resolutions.
I'd like to make a motion to approve these in block,
That's fine.
except the ones we already did.
Except there's, for 17-198, there was a change in the title of the resolution that,
Do you want to list it and then we can do it in block?
can someone read this? Because I'm not sure if I understand these notes.
It should be saying resolution authorizing the award of a contract through the National Joint Power Alliance to Kubota Tractor Corp.
So I'll make a motion in block of the resolutions with the language change from number 7.
Second.
Okay, just to clarify the resolution, it's it's exempting the one we've already done, which is number 4.
Yes.
So
Yes.
1 through 3 and 5 through 10 with the change at 7.
Right.
Okay, so it's been moved by Ms. Krumiller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Are there any questions on any of these resolutions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and next we come to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda anybody would like removed? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krumiller, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Did you vote, Tim? I did. Oh, I didn't hear you. All right, consent agenda is approved. And just, I want to make sure everyone's voting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Quinn and seconded by Ms. Krumiller. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, thank you.
We used to do that.